Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Fat Boys Dynasty podcast, presented by the Fantasy Holics Podcast Network, live for those of you tuning in with us on the Fantasy Holics YouTube channel. I'm Bo. That is Brant. Brant, last week we came in and did the running back ranking show. This week we're coming at everybody with the wide receiver rankings. And like we promised in last week's episode, there's some more disparity here at this position.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a wider variety of players there. You got your slot receivers, your inside, your outside wide receivers. There's always going to be a lot of differences when it comes to wide receiver. It's all about finding that middle ground when doing consensus ratings, which I think we did pretty good job. But we'll hit on here shortly about some of our ratings.
Absolutely. And next week, Brant, I know you and I are going to be doing something a little bit different because one half of the Fat Boys is going to be in the sunny state of Florida this week, getting his buns tan on the beach. So we're going to do something a little different. We're going to put out some sleeper rankings and startup ADP, some guys that we like that are ADPs are too low. They're going to outperform those. So be on the lookout for those episodes coming out sometime next week as well. That should be something of interest. But without further ado, Brant, let's jump into these wide receivers. There's a lot to cover here. Let's get into this.
Let's get our bibs on.
Let's eat. All right, Brant, I'm going to jump straight to this. I'm going to go ahead and get these rankings pulled up on the screen. For those of you that are live with us on the YouTube channel, you'll see those rankings before you now. For those of you listening on one of the other platforms, if you want to see the rankings Brant and I are talking about, you're going to want to visit fantasyholics.com and go to the Dynasty rankings page. You can see all the rankings, who ranked them. I'm beefing for those of you that are looking at it. That's Walk It Out, or Brant is Walk It Out, rather. So last week, Brant, we put the rankings up for running back, and we kind of went through the top 32 running backs and just kind of talked about how we felt about each one of them individually. We're going to do something a little bit different today because as a team on the Fantasy Holics, and you and I are involved in that, we ranked somewhere like 90 to 100 some wide receivers per person based on how we felt about certain rookies, and it would just be a long show of reading off names and numbers if we just went through and did that. So I think what we're going to start off Brant, is the top three players right here. On the consensus ranking, you can see CeeDee Lamb at 1, Justin Jefferson at 2, and Jamar Chase at 3. You and I, however, as the Fat Boys collab, have a different top 3, Brant. And you can see it right over there on the side of the rankings. We were in unanimous decision here. We both agreed CeeDee Lamb at 1. However, we had Justin Jefferson down at 3 and Jamar Chase at 2. Why personally did you have Justin Jefferson, who a lot of people would say in a dynasty startup should still be the wide receiver 1? Why do you have him down at 3, Brant?
So many question marks surrounding that offense. You got Addison that just came in last year. You've got TJ Hawkinson. You got brand new quarterbacks in there. Yeah, we saw what Jefferson could do with Kirk Cousins. But he's got Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy. You have no idea what really is going to be coming out of there. And yeah, Jefferson's, a once-in-a-lifetime talent. And what's crazy is you do have 3 of those at the top as we have them. I think Jamar Chase's situation is a little more stable there. You know that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase connection will be there. You know that CeeDee Lamb is probably the best route runner in the NFL right now. And that's why I have Lamb as number one. I think he is the best route runner. Yes, there's question marks at the quarterback position, but we know Dak for the foreseeable future is going to force feed him the ball because there's not a whole lot of other things there. And Jefferson, there's just so many question marks. So it does scare me. I could see this going a whole different way next year if some of these questions are answered. But right now, there's just so many question marks. I honestly struggle to even have him at number 3, but his talent's too good to let him slide any further than that.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. So I'm going to play devil's advocate for you or against you here a little bit, Brand, if you'll allow me to do so. So you brought up the points about, the good weapons around Justin Jefferson and the mediocre quarter play or the unknown quarterback play. I won't say JJ is going to be mediocre in his rookie year, even though I do think he will be, because it's a dynasty league and it's about long term. What do you say to those people that are like, well, you lost your offensive coordinator in Cincinnati, who took over the head coaching job in Tennessee there, and Brian Callahan. You lost Tyler Boyd. T. Higgins is on a holdout. Defenses have nothing to focus on except for Jamar Chase. Could that not take him out of the rankings a little bit and push him down if defenses are just, putting a safety over top of them every play because they don't have to worry about the other side of the field?
No, because with the addition of Burton there from the draft, I think there's still plenty there. Then you have help me out here, Chase Brown and Zach Moss in the backfield. I think there's still plenty there in order for Joe Burrow to feed it to. Burrow does a good job of spreading the ball out. We've watched 3 receivers over the course of 2 years with Joe Burrow be very fantasy relevant, even with, Tyler Boyd being a low-end wide receiver 3, but he still was, putting up numbers. I don't know if it matters who else lines up there. Burrow's going to find the open guy, and Chase is talented enough to get wide open or to get open. So I don't think it matters who else is there. And I absolutely, you and me talked about this, I absolutely love Burton, the guy that they added in the draft.
Yeah, I think too, again, like I said, I'm playing devil's advocate with that last little bit there because I agree. Obviously, as you can see on the screen, my rankings are the same. I actually think there's an outside path for Jamar Chase to be the wide receiver 1 this year. A lot of people are fading that Cincinnati offense just a little bit in the weapons there because Burrow got banged up and then wasn't himself last year. And that took a hit. And listen, I think Jamar Chase is going to be hyper utilized in the red zone. They got a little bit better of a tight end. I believe Mike Gesicki's there this year, which, listen, I know how we feel about Mr. Gritty, the other Mr. Gritty, I guess. But I think there's a chance for Jamar Chase to be the wide receiver 1, Brant. So we're definitely copacetic here on these rankings. I just think it's interesting because I don't know if it's necessarily a hot take, but not many people would have these rankings with Chase ahead of Jefferson. I think that a lot of people would be staring this down saying, well, Jettis has proven himself. It's got to be him because, he did it last year with spotty quarterback play. He looked okay in the time with Dobbs. I know they both missed a little bit of time there. Or not Dobbs, but Cousins missed a little bit of time, and Jefferson missed some time without Cousins, so we didn't get to see him with, Jaron Hall and the other names. But listen, the top 3, you can't go wrong with any of these guys. So I think it's really just a matter of preference. But I thought it was worth noting that you and I did have it a little bit different.
Absolutely. And I love these 1, 2, 3. I think you and me were consensus last year too. And really with these 1, 2, 3, you can almost flip-flop it either way. They are a great cornerstone to start your dynasty startup with because you can't really go wrong with any of them.
No, you really can't at all. So, all right, Brant, next we're going to move on to something that I thought was really interesting. There's some big discrepancies. So again, it's a 5-man team on these rankings. You and I are obviously just a small fraction of it. Well, we're a large fraction of it, but as far as a percentage of it, we're just a little over 2/3 or a third, of the ranking team. So what I thought was interesting is there's some big discrepancies between the rankers, some between just you and I, and then some between the rest. So I thought it was worth bringing up some of these and talking about them a little bit. So I'm going to start from the bottom, towards the bottom of the rankings here. Brant. At number 50, the Fantasy Holics have Jameson Williams ranked in this spot. Now I'm going to read the numbers to you. We have him ranked 63rd, 54th, 31, 54 for me, and then you have him ranked at 41. So a 13 spot between you and I, but between our lowest and highest ranker, there's a 32 spot difference on Jameson Williams. So let's start. Obviously, I can't ask you to advocate why he should be at 31 because you don't have him there. but I want you to tell everybody why he should be at 41. What makes JMO so special that you're like, hey, I've got this guy higher than most of the guys in the Fantasy Holics?
So you saw what he did near the end of the year. They didn't add any other weapons there. They let Josh Reynolds go. They let somebody else walked off. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown and Williams there. I absolutely love his setup now. The team trusts him. They didn't draft anybody to replace him. We saw an injury. We saw a suspension. Now we get to see his junior year, his third year. I absolutely love this guy moving forward. He was a highly touted prospect coming out. I absolutely love the situation there. And I love everything that Detroit is building on both sides of the ball. I really love what they got going on there in Detroit. Makes me sick to say it since they are in the NFC, but I absolutely love what they have going on there.
Yeah, so for me, I obviously have him 13 spots lower than you do. I have him at 54. So I'm a little closer to our consensus. 4 spots lower, you're 9 spots, or you're 9 spots lower, I'm 4 spots higher. My hesitation with JMO Brant is we're going into year 3 for this guy, and we still really haven't seen much of it on the field except for a game here, game there because of suspensions, injuries. So we really still don't know. It's unproven. Can he do it over a 17-game slate? If he can do it over a 17-game slate, as explosive as he is, as good as he is at tracking the deep ball and all those things, there's the ceiling. There is no ceiling. Okay. But if he can't stay healthy, 50 is probably too high for him. I also worry that Detroit's going to be a team that focuses on running the ball with the head coaching style they have, the 2 wonderful backs they have in Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, and then any targets are going to be eaten up by the likes of Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I do worry that Jameson Williams could be like 4th or 5th in the pecking order, which when you're catching 70-yard touchdown passes, I guess isn't the worst thing in the world. But it was enough for me to create a little difference. All right. Moving on to jumping up all the way to number 49 in our rankings is Mr. Cortland Sutton of the Denver Broncos. We have the Fantasy Holics team has him ranked 44th, 49th, 52nd. I have him at 44. Brant, you have him at 53. So about a 9-spot difference. You are the lowest ranker on the Fantasy Holics on Cortland Sutton. Why are you so down on him?
He's the old man in that wide receiver core right now. You have the addition of Franklin. You had Mims last year. You got a brand new quarterback coming in. The whole revamped system there in Denver. And I could be wrong, and I might be, but I think Sutton's on his last guaranteed year of his contract. I think he's darn near free to get cut next year, if not out of a contract. You don't know what the future holds for him. So he's scary to me with the new quarterback in town. The coaching staff all there has no ties to this man. They didn't draft him. They didn't train him. This is truly the first, second year that Sean Payton's got with him. They shipped Judy, who was probably the best target that they had. And they kept Sutton, which doesn't scare me. I just don't think they had enough bites on Sutton. That's why Judy was out the door and not Sutton. So I don't know what the future brings for him. That's why he scares me a lot in startups.
Yeah, I mean, the Browns didn't overpay by any stretch of the means to go get Jerry Jeudy. So I don't think either player had a huge market because I think Jeudy was, often underperformed due to injury. Sutton underperformed due to injury. Quarterback play with Russell Wilson was atrocious at best. But, with Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin, you're not really, throwing out any names that have me shaking in my boots. And I was a Cortland Sutton truther for a few years, if you remember, right, Brant, which there was a lot of open seats on that bus. But I don't know as though I think Cortland Sutton's got a ceiling to go much higher than wide receiver 40-ish. But if you're talking about a guy who gets 7-8 touchdowns this year, 800 yards receiving, he's going to be in that ballpark. And I do think I don't think it's crazy to say I think he should lead the Denver wide receivers in targets this year. How good will those targets be from Bo Nix? I don't know. But let's not forget, not saying that this is the same caliber of athlete, but Sean Payton can disguise a lot. Look how good Michael Thomas was for all those years in New Orleans by just running simple slant routes. Cortland Sutton can run a slant. I'm not saying he's going to do it as effectively as Michael Thomas did in his prime, but there's definitely ways to disguise this lack of weapons, and I think Sean Payton could be the guy to do so, Brant.
Okay.
All right, going all the way up to wide receiver 43 this time, we have Mr. Deontay Johnson. We have him ranked 35th, 47th, 53rd, 34th, and 45th. So I am the lowest ranker or the highest player on or highest fantasy holic on Deontay Johnson. You know my love for Mr. Deontay Johnson, but there is a 12 spot difference overall. You and I have an 11 spot difference between us. I'll let you go first. Why are you a little standoffish on Deontay Johnson this year?
This year I'm not. The dynasty wise, I am. This year I absolutely love him. I think he's a great guy to steal late in your drafts this year. I think he can really help you win this year. I love this year. It's once again, he's the old man in the system there. They just added Leggett this year. They added help me out here. They added another. Yeah, they added him last year. They added Jonathan Brooks in the backfield. I almost did it again like I did at work today. They added Brooks in the backfield. This team's getting young, new coaching staff. I love that they traded for him. I love what he has this season. It's just what is the future for him? I'm not sure because he is the old guy in the room. Is he just there to be that veteran presence like we talk about Stephon Diggs going to the Texans, being that veteran presence, Mixon being that veteran presence? Is he just there until the young guys take off, or is he there for the long haul?
Well, sir, I don't know how to tell you this, but that's blatantly disrespectful to the actual old man in the room there, who is one of the best veteran wide receivers in the NFL. Adam Thielen is still on this roster in Carolina. They don't need Deontay Johnson to come in and coach up anybody. I think Deontay Johnson's there to ball out. They're saying, listen, we need to figure out what we've got in our quarterback, and the best way to do so is to give him some weapons right now. That's why they signed Deontay Johnson, or traded for Deontay Johnson, excuse me. That's why they went out and drafted Xavier Leggett, traded into the first to do so. They are trying to put as much talent around Bryce Young as they can year one to see what they've got. I think this offense is going to be one of the run heaviest offenses in football, which I know doesn't like throw or pour gasoline on the fire that is Deontay Johnson. But I think he's going to be excel in play action. He's a good route runner. He's going to find soft space. And the difference between Deontay Johnson at this point in his career and Adam Thielen at his career, at this point in Thielen's career, is Deontay Johnson's going to get some yak. There's going to be some yards after catch for Deontay Johnson this year in Carolina, which Adam Thielen doesn't even know how to spell yak at this point. So I think there's going to be you could see a ceiling. I tried to not be too bullish with my rankings, Brant. I think you could see Deontay Johnson be a wide receiver, bona fide wide receiver 2 in fantasy leagues next year. And then moving on, I think he does so as well, because I think he's still only like 27 years old. He's still got a few years of solid production left.
Okay.
All right. Here's another big discrepancy in the team here. We've got a 23 spot difference for the Fantasy Holics at the 41st ranked consensus player, which is Calvin Ridley, leaving the Jacksonville Jaguars, now of the Tennessee Titans. We have him ranked as follows: 51, 42, 28, 36, and 40. So you and I are only about 4 spots difference there. You're 1 spot below consensus. I'm 4 spots lower, or I guess higher in the situation. We're higher on the set player. What makes Calvin Ridley not higher than where he is at the 40 spot, though, Brant? Like, why? We've got one ranker who says, hey, he's 28th overall. Why is he not that high consensusly in your mind?
First off, we've always seen this team be run heavy. I know it's a new coaching staff, some new system. Hopkins, Burks, Ridley. You have 3 great wideouts with the young QB that's going to be looking for the best. And then don't forget, Chig is still there too to catch the ball. That's 4 great weapons. We'll say 4 good. I don't want to put Chig in great, but you got 3 good to great wide receivers.
Wait a minute. Time out. We got to have a conversation here. You won't put Chig in great, but you're going to name Treylon Burks as a great receiver.
Yes, you know my love for him. I've watched plenty of film. He's going to get it right.
But I know your love. I'm shocked you're willing to put it out there in the face of the nation, because a lot of people have got him as cut list.
He's great wide receiver 3 on a team.
Okay, yeah, he's not synonymous with the word great in my mind, unless a great disappointment for the fantasy community to this point. But outside of that, I digress. Go ahead and continue, Brant.
But it's a young QB. He's going to spread the ball out. He's not going to. I know he's going to air raid that ball. you and me talked about, and I'll let you bring it up about his drop rate on deep balls. We know Will Levis's cannon of an arm. I just don't think that it's going to be enough to make all of these wideouts be great. And once again, what's the whole staff going to look like there? What's the new offense going to look like? What's Tennessee going to look like without Derrick Henry? It's almost a wait and see game with the Tennessee Titans this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, Calvin Ridley did have some issues with tracking the deep ball last year. You know, he had I want to say like the 4th worst catch rate of deep balls in football last year. He could not hang on to him. He had a case of the drops on those deep ones. I believe he dropped one against the Falcons in their animated Disney London experience last year that was on Nickelodeon. But again, if he's not utilized the same way in Tennessee, when I've got D-Hop on the same field, I'm not going to have Calvin Ridley be my deep ball guy. So maybe if he's used as more of a gadget slot type of wide receiver, maybe you see his stock take rise again. We've seen Will Levis have a 4-touchdown game also against my Atlanta Falcons. But I don't know if that's something he can do consistently. And I'm going to leave Chig. I'm going to leave Treylon Burks out of this. I'm not sure Will Levis is good enough week in and week out to substantiate 2 pretty good veteran wide receivers in Ridley and D-Hop. And not to mention, still in my mind, one of the better pass catching backs in football is also in that backfield. And Tony Pollard, who I imagine Tajay Spears is still, he's got a way to go to be in the top conversation for me when you still got Eckler and Kamara and Pollard hanging out in the NFL. When those guys start to ride off and form to dust like the Thanos snap, then we can have that conversation. But I do think, again, there's going to be fantasy relevant weeks. I just don't think it's going to be consistent enough for Ridley to be much higher than where he's at.
Okay. Absolutely.
Now, the next player, the sky is the limit, Brant. We talked about this guy at work as well today. You just didn't know he's going to be on the show tonight. At number 37, the Fantasy Holics have Keon Coleman. There's an 18-spot discrepancy amongst the team here. First rookie we're going to talk about on the show today, Brant. We've got him at 47, 29, 39, 35 for me, 38 for you. He is consensus 37, so you and I are right there on this one. But we do have one ranker who's got him at 47 and one all the way down at 29. What's the wide range of outcomes for Keon Coleman? Is there a realm of possibility he gets up that high for you? And on the flip side of the coin, is there a realm of possibility where he's like, wow, that was a bust?
Absolutely. He is tied to one of a great quarterback in Josh Allen. With Keon Coleman, so I watched some film on him, and I've done my research on him, and originally I was not a fan of him. The drop balls, the missed passes, and then you go back and a lot of it falls back on his quarterback.
Who'd you call him? The next what?
Quentin Johnston.
Yeah,
drop ball specialist. So I went back and I started watching the quarterback a little more, and it had a lot to do with the quarterback mechanics. He was forcing the ball into some bad spots, so Coleman couldn't get his hands on it. He's tied to Josh Allen. He's working out with Josh Allen. He's working out with CeeDee Lamb already. I absolutely love what he is doing to make himself. He's making his name known to everybody in the football community with his great TikToks and his great memes. Great. He's going to be fun to watch. His interviews are going to be great, and he could go from bust to complete top 20 wide receiver with who he is tied to. There's not a whole lot catching balls there. I absolutely love Coleman going forward. It all depends on how the chemistry and everything develops.
Yeah, I did notice a trend in these dynasty rankings, and that was that almost every rookie wide receiver, with the exception of Marvin Harrison, and I believe even Neighbors, as you can see on the screen, there was some big discrepancies between the Fantasy Holics teams. Some of us were very high on some of these guys. Some of us were not so much. So there's definitely a level of distaste for rookie wide receivers from a few of our rankers here. So we may have to bring that up on the page at some point, right? Because we got to put some respect on Keon's name. I'm going to go hard in the paint on this next one here because of my massive amount of love for this guy. But at number 34, we have Rashee Rice. Again, a 19-point discrepancy or 19 place discrepancy here, 49, 36, 38, 29. I am the lowest. You are, however, right there with me at 30. Rashee Rice, Brant, I'm going to give you a quick second to throw your sense out there, and then I'm going to pour a pocket full of change on it.
Mine's real short and sweet. Number 1 target or number 2 target getter right now for Patrick Mahomes. End of story right there.
Yeah, I actually think there's an outside chance, Brant, that Rashee Rice is the number 1 target for Patrick Mahomes this year. I saw something, and I wish I could remember. I was listening to a podcast myself recently, and they came out with this analogy that Travis Kelce, I believe it was the Dynasty War Room, actually, the one I was listening to this morning from the Player Profiler. They came out this morning and said that Travis Kelce is like your grandfather's Corvette. It looks great, but you don't drive it in all kinds of weather conditions. You keep that baby in the garage, you keep a cover on it, you keep great shape of it, and you only take it out and show it when it's really worth it. That analogy to me then means that, hey, maybe we're in fact gonna let Travis not get 10 plus targets a game, utilize them heavily around the red zone, or maybe in some of those games where it's like, hey, we're playing the Bills this week, or hey, we're playing the Bengals or the Ravens, and we want to put some points up. Maybe Travis Kelce won't be involved too much week 3 when the Atlanta Falcons travel to Kansas City and can get whooped. But I do think Rashee Rice showed us all year last year what he is capable of. And Andy Reid is one of the smartest coaches in football. He's going to have this guy drawn up, plays for him, Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelce, Pacheco for that matter. And they have the best quarterback in the NFL. I'm not so sure in 5 years if we're not talking about Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is one of the greatest to ever do it. I think it's probably a little rich to say that at this point, but some of the God-given talent he has and some of the things he does with the football make it to where you almost want to say it now, Brant. But I do think if Rashee Rice avoids suspension, especially this year, you're talking about a top 20 wide receiver finish. But here's the thing, Brant, in Dynasty, you and I just traded for him in a league. You're not just drafting for this year. You're not just rostering players for this year. And it's not really my job to worry about your I don't have to have my morals involved in a fantasy lineup. I don't have to care if you're a good person or a good human being for fantasy, as long as you put up points, because at the end of the day, I don't have to tell people, hey, I'm rostering Ray Rice because I agree with what he believes in, right? That's nobody's doing that. So I do think there are a lot of people are scared of Rashee Rice this year because of the pending suspension. But if we just look at what Alvin Kamara did a couple of years ago after the Pro Bowl in Vegas, and we use that as like a principle, like line in the sand to judge when this is going to happen for her, it's going to be a while before Rashee Rice faces any kind of punishment. So I will go ahead and take advantage of him and continue to roster him. And if other people want to trade him to me cheaply, I will be on the receiving end of that with no problem. And again, sorry for the passionate long rant, but you know my love for Rashee Rice.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to move up and talk about a player you put on the trade block last night in one of our leagues. At number 33, we've got Jalen Reed of the Green Bay Packers. 13 spot difference here on Jalen. We've got 31, 30, 25. I am the lowest ranker on him at 38, and then you have him pretty closely with me at 35. So how does Jaden Reed get to 25 in your mind? Is there a way for him to get that high, or probably not for you?
I don't know. I'm not sure who the number 1 target is. I think he could be one of the most talented guys on the roster. We've seen him have breakouts. We've seen Watson have breakouts. We talked about another name today in Wicks. And then you got the 2 tight ends there. There in Green Bay. You just have Jordan Love who spreads that ball out, and I absolutely love it. I think there are some weeks that he could finish as wide receiver 25. There might be a year or two that he could finish that high, but it's going to be extremely hard for him to consistently stay like that with the different weapons that are there in Green Bay. So I just don't trust it. And I think he is very talented. It could be the most talented wide receiver on that team, but still you got to wait till time will tell with it, because Watson banged up, and then I think Reed missed some time. I think Wicks missed some time. So it was tough there in the and then Dobbs missed some time. Romeo did too. So time will tell with this. I think the ball gets spread out too much there in Green Bay in order to have one dominant receiver. They don't have I'm completely drawing a blank here. Guy that just went to Vegas. Why am I drawing a complete blank?
Devontae Adams.
Thank you. They don't have an Adams there anymore, so
You can't remember Devontae Adams' name, but you just called Treylon Burks great. We might have to have a side conversation at some point here.
Here's zero shares of Adams anywhere.
Well, you can't remember his name, so I don't blame you. I think I tend to agree with you on the Reed thing, but here's the thing. I do think if you're talking about which wide receiver, if I had to go put money down on which Green Bay wide receiver is going to finish the season with the most fantasy points, I think you have to go Christian Watson because he can get so many in one game, which we've seen in the past. He's not going to stay healthy. He's not going to play 17 games. We know that. Although it did come out, which I was intrigued by this, apparently somehow in some way the training he had been doing, his right leg was 20% more dense and muscle than his left leg, which medically they found out, they were able to do studies that found out why he was tearing hamstrings. And so he's got it down to like 4% difference this year. So he's saying it's the best he's ever felt. So maybe we do see a healthy Christian Watson. Maybe it's Christian Watson season. However, again, I think you're right. I think each one of these wide receivers has their strengths. Christian Watson is a get the ball in his hands, let him do his thing, yak guy. He's going to explode for points. Dontavian Wicks, we talked about today. He's one of the best against man coverage. Jalen Reed's getting open anywhere and everywhere. He's just not going to do a whole lot after he catches the ball. He doesn't have breakaway speed, but he's very consistent. Him and Romeo Doubs have a very similar game in my mind. Doubs just had a little bit more issues with drops at this point. And then you got to talk about their talented tight end room with Kraft and Musgrave as well. There's really not a weakness anywhere in that pass catching game. There's just also nobody that separates. And so I think you're right on the analogy of there's going to be a lot of spreading the ball out here. I think it's going to be really hard to pinpoint which Green Bay wide receiver you want to roll with. And so maybe that's the difference here. All right. Almost into our top 25, Brant. 26, we have another rookie wide receiver. We have Brian Thomas of the Jacksonville Jaguars, 15-point discrepancy, and you are the lowest on him. So I'm going to let you defend why he shouldn't be at 26. But we have one ranker at 26, one at 16, another at 26. I have him at 27. You have him at 31, Brant. Why should he not be inside the top 30?
Well, when I made these rankings, and I will go back and adjust fire here, I had not done a whole lot of film watch and research. He was buried behind how good Neighbors was of a generational talent. So I think this is going to be a guy that I will consider moving up in my ranks. I had him this low because I didn't really know where he fit in that offense. With Christian Kirk was great without Ridley 2 years ago. Now they're without Ridley. Christian Kirk's back up front. And then you got ETN coming out of the backfield. You had Evan Ingram, just so many targets and not a whole lot of vacated targets for him. So I wasn't sure really where he would fit with this team. So it made me a little nervous with him. But like I said, I went back and I started watching a little more on him. This is a guy that's going to probably creep up my rankings as the offseason goes on. But I just wasn't completely sold on him. And I'm still not completely sold on him yet. So I just don't know if he's the most talented guy there in Jacksonville.
I'm gonna read off one stat from his college career last year, Brant, and I want you to tell me just based on this one number if this is something that you think you can get him into your top 30 with. Now, with this being said, I know you just brought up Neighbors and how Brian Thomas was never going to be the alpha with Malik Neighbors at LSU. 17 touchdowns last season for Brian Thomas, Brant. 17 in the SEC. That's some damn good cornerback play. Does that give you any kind of he was playing with a pro caliber quarterback, but he's going to be playing with a pro caliber quarterback now in Trevor Lawrence as well. Doug Peterson runs a fairly decent scheming offense. And look at the Zay Jones stuff from a few years ago. Zay Jones was fantasy relevant with Trevor Lawrence opposite of Christian Kirk. Can you see a way for him to get into the top 30 if that touchdown equity is even half of what it was in college?
That touchdown equity is there in Jacksonville. Absolutely. He'll be creeping up my boards pretty fast. I guess not creeping. He'll be flying up my boards pretty fast. but Evan Ingram is still there in town, and that goal line carries for ETN, and then you also have Tank,
he's not good at.
So right, but they still want to feed him the ball, and I'm not sure why anymore. But if that equity's there, then absolutely he'll be going up my rankings.
Okay. Moving into our top 20 at this point, Brent, we're going to go straight to 16, which you can see this one on the board. Michael Pittman. This is a 10 spot difference. So as we get up, it's not as crazy. 13 spot difference is what I can't read my own writing. 7, 20, 18. I have him at 15. You have him at 17, Brant. I have a hard time believing that Michael Pittman could get into the top 10. There's just too many good names in front of him. I don't trust Anthony Richardson yet as a passing quarterback. Fun fact, Anthony Richardson has never finished a game he started in the National Football League at this point, which is odd. But if he doesn't finish games, I know Garner Minshew was good. And Pittman just doesn't have anything that he's just so good at that's going to separate him from anybody else. They go out and draft A.D. Mitchell this year. They have Alec Pierce on the roster. What was the wide receiver? I'm drawing a blank now. I hope you're there to help me out. In town last year that also took away targets. Was a rookie last year. Jelani Woods should take a step forward as a tight end. You've got Jonathan Taylor back and healthy. Josh Downs. There we go. It came to my own brain. I think Pittman is a very, very, very good wide receiver too. Almost top end wide receiver too. I just don't see him being, he's not a yak guy. He's not a Deebo Samuel. He's not going to put up like a Deebo Samuel, like highlight reel type of a season. He's not going to come down with 15 touchdown catches. So it's just one of those guys. He catches the ball when he needs to. He moves the chains, and he's going to have some games where he has 8 receptions for 110 yards and a touchdown. And those weeks are going to be really great. But there's also going to be some weeks where he has 8 receptions for 48 yards and 0 scores. And it's not as good. It's still good, but it's not winning in weeks. I just personally, Brant, and I'll give you a chance to maybe argue with me here. I don't see a way for him to be a top 10 wide receiver.
We have no idea where the chemistry is going to be with Anthony Richardson. As far as we know, A.D. Mitchell could be the next big name there in Indy. Downs could be. Jelani Woods could be. You could just feed the ball to Jonathan Taylor. I don't trust that receiving core right now. I don't see him getting up in the top 10. Even if he does become the number 1 there, I still don't see a way him getting into the top 10. I settle comfortably with him in the wide receiver 2 range.
Okay. All right. The last one for our big discrepancies here is wide receiver 10 in our consensus ranking. 9 in our consensus ranking, which I think you can see on the screen there, Brant, is Mr. Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, we've got at 10, 5, 13, 10. Excuse me, 10 and 9. So we have another 8-spot discrepancy here in the top 10, which is kind of unique to be that far off. Tyreek Hill was the wide receiver, 1 or 2 last season, Brant? And the season before that, he was right there as well. I know these are dynasty rankings. Why is he not all across the board a top 7 or 8 wide receiver at worst?
He's talked about moving off into the sunset and retiring from the game in a year or 2. He's talked about breaking, once he reaches his goal, the 2,000-yard goal, and I think he said another Super Bowl, he's done. So if he does that this year, he could possibly be done next year. There's so many question marks surrounding him. I do believe this year he finishes inside the top 5. I think he's the top 5 for wide receiver still, but there's too many question marks about his future and staying there. There's also question marks behind the quarterback there. I know Tua was good last year at times, but we saw him flake it sometimes too. At Waddle, he's going to receive more double coverages, I think, this year than he ever has, because they're going to, if Miami's going to win, they're going to have to let Waddle do it. Like they can't just rely on Hill doing it all. And I think defenses are going to start making them rely on Waddle more. I think Tyreek has another good year, but how many more does he actually have? Does he even play more than 1 more?
Yeah, I think those are all relevant questions. Andy brought it up. Tua's got injury concerns too. If Tua goes down, I think that does hinder a little bit. And Jalen Waddle's fairly competent as well. You've got running backs that can get a carry inside of their own 20 and take it 80 yards and end a drive really quick too, which takes possessions and potential targets away from these guys. So, and again, like you alluded to, his age, he's the only wide receiver north of 30 that's in our top 15, I believe. So, our top 20 as I'm looking at it. So, it's a hard spot because he is uber talented, but we don't know how long he's going to be on the field. All right. Last but not least here, I want to talk about a couple rookies that, as you can see on our board, made the top 20 for us as a team here. You've got Rome Odunze at 20, Malik Neighbors at 12, and then, of course, Marvin Harrison Jr. at 5. All right, we're going to keep this really brief, Brent. We've got about a 40-minute episode in here. We're going to get out of here in just a second. I'm going to ask you just quick, because I know you and I, where we both stand on Rome. We think Rome's going to be really good. He's really talented, but it's not going to be a this year situation for Rome. And then I think obviously we both know where Harrison's at. Harrison's got to be a top 10 pick. He was taken in the fourth, not a top 10 pick, a top 10 wide receiver. Excuse me. He was taken in the first round, 4th overall by the Arizona Cardinals. We like the quarterback situation. I want to talk about Malik Neighbors and some of these players we have around him. So at 10, Chris Olave. Do you want Chris Olave or do you want Malik Neighbors?
I want Olave.
Okay. Waddle or Neighbors?
I want Neighbors.
Neighbors or London?
London.
Ayuk or Neighbors?
I'm not a fan of Ayuk, so I'm going to go with Neighbors there.
And then I'll ask lastly on this one, but I think I know where your head's at on this one already. Neighbors or Pittman?
Neighbors.
Okay. If Neighbors had somebody under center not named Daniel Jones, is it fair to say that this guy is
sitting right behind
He's probably up? I thought so, like top 5, top 6, somewhere in that neighborhood.
You're talking him around Puka, and actually I'm the lowest up Puka, so you're talking with him around Garrett Wilson, AJ Brown type. Well,
okay, that's fair. I just think the player's talented. We know that he's going to have a good year, but he's going to have a good career. I mean, we just don't know what his year is going to be because of Daniel Jones.
His year is how many targets does Daniel Jones force into his body? That's what his year is going to depend on, because we know they're not winning any games. So it all depends on how many times can he throw the ball to Neighbors.
Hey, that's fair. So again, if you want to check out those rankings, fantasyholics.com, you've got the quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends up there. You can go check those out at any given time. They're on that page. Go give it a link or go check it out. Again, pay attention next week for some special episodes. You're going to have Bran on here doing his thing by himself, solo without the other half of the Fat Boys.
If I could figure out how to work it all.
Right. You're going to have me on here at some point with my own sleepers, just a couple, short segments to get you through while one half of the Fat Boys is on vacation next week. I think that pretty well does it for this week's wide receivers. Thanks for tuning in with us, guys. Look forward to having you back again. One last thing before we part out of here. If you are interested in being in that league with the rest of with us and the rest of the Fantasy Holics, make sure you interact on the page, get yourself a chance for an invite. That does it for this, Fat Boy.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining in today. Love going over the wide receivers. Always fun. That is normally the staple of your Dynasty roster nowadays. But as always, stay hungry
and stay fat, my friends.